friends, Taylor from Doomed to Fail. It is the week between Christmas and New Year's, so trying to do as little as possible. But I do want to put some re-releases out for you. So we're going to start with episode 12, part 1, the sad, sad story of our dear, dear Phil Hartman, gone way, way too soon. If you have any ideas or questions or things that we should do as we kind of move into doing more disaster stories, send us an email, doomedtofailpod@gmail.com. Thank you.
In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Hi everyone, welcome to Doomed to Fail. I'm Farz, joined here. Fucked it up again. Hi everyone.
What? No, you didn't. That's your name.
That is my name, but that's not how. So I got
Okay,
to do
go.
I gotta do the funny.
Okay.
Hi everyone, welcome to Doomed to Fail, the podcast where Taylor and I desperately want to be rich and famous. So please subscribe to everything and please rate it, and then tell your friends to rate it and subscribe and listen. And if you don't want to listen, that's fine. You can actually turn the volume off, let it just run in the background because the algorithms don't know that you're listening. So there's always
Great idea.
Always a solution to the problem. I'm Farz. I'm joined here by Taylor. Taylor, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm tired.
I'm
I
up.
locked myself out of my house last night, and I sat there for 2 hours in 40-degree weather, waiting with like no clothes on, basically waiting for a locksmith, which was awesome. My dog
Oh
looked
my
at
God.
me.
I was gonna.
She was like staring at me, like, "You realize this is stupid, right?" Like she literally was giving me that eye.
She's real embarrassed, I bet. Yeah, I was gonna ask about the weather. So it wasn't raining? I don't know.
That was yeah. At the very least, it wasn't raining, so that's why I
You
had
had your phone.
I did have my phone.
Did you
Yeah,
have your phone?
if I
That's
didn't have my
good.
phone, I don't actually know what I would have. What do you do? Like
Just like
actually, I don't know my
walk to a
neighbors.
neighbor's house and hope they don't call the police? I don't know. Yeah.
I guess.
Were you wearing shoes? I don't know.
Yeah, I was wearing shoes.
That's good at least. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you got in and don't do that again.
Yeah, I'm gonna try my best. Taylor, did you want to call out the most recent addition to the media channels portfolio of the Doomed to Fail network?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So I started uploading our audio to YouTube. So it's just like our picture and then the audio. But I know that YouTube is a big platform for listening to podcasts. So I put everything on there. And our episode about Alex Murdaugh and him being a murderer has 180 or something views already. I don't know if people are listening to the whole thing. It also has 2 thumbs downs, which I feel like is not necessary, and I can't find out who thumbs downed it. But we did gain 2 more
We're coming for you.
subscribers. So now we have 4 subscribers. And so yeah, that's a fun way to listen to it. So if you're on YouTube, please subscribe. I'll put the link in our in the notes, but it's just like Doomed to Fail podcast at YouTube. And I want everyone to subscribe. Just come on in there. It's another way to listen to it. That's super fun. And then also we've been hopping on Instagram this week. I posted something about RFK Jr. making an exploratory committee to run for president. And I have several crazy people wrote comments about how he's a great man and a great liberal and upholds his family's legacy. And then when I go to their profiles, there's one person who's literally their entire profile is trying to get ChatGPT to confirm that trans people aren't real. And I'm like, grow up. That's so dumb. What are you doing with your life?
I wonder how he strung the theory together that you use ChatGPT. I don't know. I mean, I guess ChatGPT is pretty powerful. Taylor, how many views did you say we had on the Don't Murdoch Your Family?
I think like 180. I can look.
Okay, we're at 183 because you messaged me yesterday saying 120. So wait, at 8 p.m. yesterday, my time, we had 128, and then we went up by 60 as of this morning
Yeah,
in like 14 hours.
I know. I think that's because of some keywords. And then also people started watching the other ones. So Traitors and Terrorists, Rush into the Apocalypse got some views. Not as many, but a couple. So I don't know. Maybe people look around. So that's exciting.
We'll
I feel like that's not
eventually.
people we know.
Yeah, it's definitely not people we know. It will eventually actually just because we record these as videos, so we will eventually just upload the videos as well. Once
Yeah, we'll get there.
I need to learn how to edit better, as y'all already can tell from my regular editing.
I think you do great. You taught yourself how to do it in like 4 minutes. So great job.
So Taylor, hey, first off, who's going first today? Is it me?
Yeah, it's you.
Okay. Do you want to tell us what your drink is, and I'll segue into true crime and tell 'em what my drink is?
Yeah. So for me, we're gonna drink more wine because we're going back into ancient times where wine was like water. You just drink wine. I don't know if you even drank water. Because we're gonna go to the Eastern Roman Empire and Byzantium later. So get your red wine out.
Byzantium. Love
I'll
it.
hand it over to you. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, I will kick things off. My drink today is a drink y'all probably won't remember because if you're much younger than Taylor and I, you won't remember much of what I'm going to talk about today. The drink is Slice Soda, which, if y'all do remember, it was basically in competition with Sprite and 7 Up for the War of the Lemon flavored sodas, which we all remember, of course, in the 90s.
Of course.
The reason I picked Slice is because the pitch man back in the 90s is who I'm going to be discussing. He was really funny, and he calls the cans that they come in metallic containers and promotes it by saying if you buy 6 of them, they come with a plastic carrying container, which of course is the plastic thing that holds the 6 cans together. It's silly. It's over the top. It's a commercial. He was legitimately their pitch man, but it's also an accurate descriptor of who I'll be discussing today. This was probably one of my favorite humans we lost in a very, very tragic way. And I think you'll remember this person, Taylor. This is another one of those people when I found out the news that they had passed, it was a complete kick to the gut. I'm going to be discussing today Phil Hartman.
Oh.
Yeah. I love being our age. I love being our age because like we understand. These kids don't get it.
Oh, my heart.
I'm gonna get out of my rocking chair with my spittoon and straw hat in a minute. But so let's go into the bio of Phil Hartman and who he was. So Phil was born in Ontario, Canada, which I never knew. I didn't know he was Canadian. I thought he was one of ours, which he clearly is not. His early life really isn't all that interesting. He had a ton of siblings. The family moved around a bunch. That's basically the gist of it. Except there's one weird connection he has to Marilyn Manson and the Manson murders. He went to school with Squeaky Fromm. Did you know that?
Oh, no way. Charles Manson. But
what'd I say?
no way. You said Marilyn Manson.
I've been listening to a lot of rock after the Nirvana episode. Yeah, I put stuff like that on loop.
That's interesting. Squeaky Fromm is from Canada?
No. When they moved to California.
Got it.
Yeah. So
I'm gonna look up a picture of Phil Hartman, have him just smile at me during this.
Yeah, I watched a lot of Phil Hartman while I was doing this. So I remember him. Hold on, I'm gonna go admonish Luna.
Okay. Oh, I'm looking at Farz is going to tell you where he remembers Phil Hartman from, but News Radio. Oh, he was so delightful on News Radio. Obviously, he was on SNL. Just like a really sweet man.
Admonishment complete, I think.
Great.
I was gonna say, Taylor, I mostly remember Phil from Saturday Night Live. I'm wondering how you remember him the most.
Definitely from SNL. I watched it like live in the 90s. I also feel like his voice comes up in like a ton of like animated things. And like whenever I hear him, I'm like, oh, it's Phil Hartman, I can tell. And then also, not recently, but like 10 years ago, we rewatched News Radio. And he was so good in that. And also, I'm looking it up and being reminded that 2 awful people were in News Radio, Joe Rogan and Andy Dick, who are both fucking terrible. So that's interesting that they just happened to be in there too. But yeah, he was so sweet in News Radio.
Okay, I'm going to disagree with you on the Joe Rogan bit, but I will agree with you on the Andy Dick bit, and both of those are going to be pretty prominent characters in this story as I go about discussing it. We can discuss Joe Rogan offline, but he is going to come up.
I'm surprised. No, continue. Go ahead. Oh, his Bill Clinton impression.
His Bill Clinton. I watched so many of his clips where the one where he goes to a Mcdonald. Okay, you know what? I'm going down a rabbit hole right now, and I'm totally derailing everything I wrote in this outline. So let me continue on, and then we'll segue back to all that stuff. But yes, SNL. I think of people of our generation, that's how you know Phil Hartman. He started attending improv classes when he was 27 years old. For work around this time, he was actually a graphic artist, and part of what he did was he would design logos and album covers. So I didn't know this about him, but he did the album cover for one of Steely Dan's albums and the logo for Crosby, Stills, and Nash, which super cool, right?
That's cool. Yeah.
The comedy group that he joined was called the Groundlings. They
Hmm.
also throughout their not necessarily when he was there, but it was a fairly prominent comedy troupe. So Kathy Griffin, Will Ferrell, Lisa Kudrow, Melissa McCarthy, Paul Rubin, Maya Rudolph, those were all folks that came out of this comedy troupe.
Hmm.
And like I don't know much about comedy troupes, but they kind of sound like NCAA sports programs where like there's some programs that produce the best of the best, the cream of the crop.
Hmm.
And it seems like Ground Leagues is one of them. Second Cities is another one that people probably are
Yeah,
familiar.
that's the one I know is Second City. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
In this case, it's worth noting that Phil's part of the reason why the Groundlings became who they became because he joined the troupe a year after it was formed, and then he went on
Mm.
to. He's the reason why all these other folks, you know, like Will Ferrell, Maya Rudolph, and all them, have it has this reputation to attract them. And I just listed off Paul Rubin, who, if you don't know, is the actor who played Pee Wee Herman in Pee Wee's Playhouse. Another thing I learned doing this, they were in the Groundlings together at the exact same time. And during this time, Phil is the one who created the character of Pee Wee Herman. And he was in the show and he
Right,
produced a
he's
bunch of
in
them.
it.
Yeah, he's in
Yeah.
it. Yeah. But
Yeah. I
but
forgot about that.
it all started during this time when they were both in the Groundlings. He's so
Yeah, because Pee Wee
interconnected.
started off as like an adult show, right? Like
Was it?
it wasn't always for kids. I think it was like a little like raunchier in the
Really?
in Inception, and then it was like, oh, kids like this. But I think it was like because he was in it. Anyway, we can talk. Let's have a second Phil Hartman episode. We just talk about how much we love Phil
Seriously.
Hartman.
I could
Okay,
go on for like weeks on that. Like I mentioned earlier, Phil joined SNL in its 12th season in 1986. I'm okay, so we need to start having sections where it's like Farz starts his rant here so that people know they can fast forward from there because it's just going to be me
perfect.
yelling.
Can't wait.
For those of you who are younger, the SNL actually used to be amazing. There seems to be like fits and starts. So my opinion right now is I don't watch SNL. I think it kind of sucks. And every now and then, if like a skit is actually particularly good, it gets enough media play where I'll pay attention to it. But outside of that, it's not my go-to to watch.
Yeah.
There seems to be fits and starts. So there are particular cast members and seasons where when they came together, it created just comedy gold. The biggest of those years in cast members would be at the very beginning of SNL. It wouldn't last very long. If I remember correctly, it was 3 or 4 seasons where they caught lightning in a bottle. Those would be the years of John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, and Bill Murray, which are obviously
Hmm.
like the Mount Everest of comedy, essentially.
Hmm.
Another one of those peaks, I mean, I would argue, others might not, were several of the seasons Phil Hartman was on the show as well. So the cast members during
Yeah.
this time were Dana Carvey. Do you remember his George Bush impressions?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Gold. Absolute gold. Chris Farley was on at this time.
I
They overlap with
mean,
each other. Chris Rock was on it. Adam Sandler, Al Franken, David Spade, and Rob Schneider. Like to us, I think Taylor, like our generation, like this was our Mount Everest of comedy.
absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely watched it all the time. I think I stayed up to watch it as well.
Yeah, same.
Because obviously, like how else would I watched it? It's not like it was on reruns
Yeah.
or the internet. So yeah. Yeah, I remember.
For this work happy hour thing a couple of years ago, I was out with my former boss at the time, who's a few years older than me, but like same similar generation. And for some reason, we started discussing like our favorite Chris Farley skit, and one of our younger colleagues who was there with us goes, "Who's Chris Farley?" I was like,
Can you
"How?"
tell me who that was? You side chat me who that was.
I'm gonna say it here, and then I'm gonna send it to him. It's Marco Suarez.
Marco.
I'm gonna,
Unbelievable.
I'm actually gonna, yeah, I'm glad. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna call out another one. Morgan Sayeg. She also was there and said, "I don't know who he is either."
Morgan?
Yeah,
Jesus Christ. That's hilarious. And also I'm looking at pictures of Phil Hartman lovingly on Google. Do you remember you had to buy the DVDs that was like best of Phil Hartman?
yeah,
And you'd buy the
yeah,
DVD and it would have like 20 skits on it.
yeah. Good old
Anyway,
days, right?
that's nice. Hmm.
the Chris Farley thing, like when I heard that, absolutely crushed me. He's actually like my favorite SNL cast member, and I actually kind of assumed he'd be number 3 on the list of all-time greatest, only behind Belushi and Murray. I found this list that ranked him number 15, which seems like insane. Like
That's insane.
for so Kristen Wiig and Dana Carvey ranked higher, which I love both of them, but they're not better than Chris Farley.
No.
Do you remember his Chippendale character or like Matt
Oh my God.
Foley?
Well, I mean, so we could get into this, but like the Chippendale sketch like really hurt him emotionally.
Really?
He was
Why?
like
I've never heard
really,
this.
really upset because it's like essentially a body shaming sketch, and people are like laughing at him because of his body. And afterwards, he was just like, "What the fuck am I doing? Like, I'm just this like fat guy being, taken advantage of." And he felt terrible after that. I think that I read that somewhere when I was reading sad things about Chris Farley one day.
Well, now I feel
He
bad
was only like
for
25 when he died, too. Yeah, no, but I mean, it's funny, but that was his shtick. But I think he was probably like getting a little tired of it, even though he was so young. Anyway, we'll talk
Yeah.
about Chris Farley later.
Well, no, we're gonna go into a little bit more of a rant here. So, the author of this, because I just like personally was like, how are you ranking these people? So he ranked Norm Macdonald 139 out of 145 of cast
What?
members. Yeah, he ranked
Okay, well,
Dennis.
fuck this list. This list makes
He
no sense.
he ranked Dennis Miller ahead of Kate McKinnon.
No,
Like,
out. Get him out.
okay, I'm gonna call him out here. His name is Rob Sheffield of Rolling Stone. And by the way, I also read your ranking of the top 100 country albums. Taylor Swift beat At Folsom Prison by Johnny Cash.
Yeah, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
Shania Twain was 10 spots ahead of Loretta Lynn's Coal Miner's Daughter on his list.
No, no,
Crazy.
no. I remember watching the Coal Miner's Daughter movie with my grandma and my mom.
One of the all-time
anyway.
great albums ever
Yeah.
made. Not just country, just ever.
Get him.
Okay, I'll stop. But I'm just saying, like, this guy seems like he's just throwing darts at a board when he's deciding who's funny and
I
who's
love
the
it.
best album. Anyways, back to the story. So again, like this era of SNL, these actors, they were basically the best thing on TV and for comedy in the early 90s, essentially. I mean, you mentioned Phil Hartman's Clint impression. That is actually the thing that started the whole how we mock presidents thing
Nice.
going forward.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, so now we're familiar with Daryl Hannah or Will Ferrell or all those guys doing president mockery things, and really it was Phil's impression of Clinton that kind of set this off. Phil would eventually leave SNL to go work at the show that you just mentioned, the sitcom you mentioned, News Radio, which, to be honest, Taylor, I've never seen it. It sounds like people who watch
great.
it
You
think
should
it's
watch
great.
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does it hold up?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, the only part, I don't know how many, it lasts like one season after Phil Hartman dies, and it is different and so sad, and everyone's sad.
Yeah.
It's like you can feel the sadness in the room. So after that happens, I think we like maybe watched like half of it and then stop watching it because it's not the same, and everyone is just fucking heartbroken.
Yeah. Yeah, I read that he actually posthumously won an Emmy for his work on that show, so it must have been good.
No.
Between his time on SNL and News Radio, he also worked on The Simpsons, where he voiced some of the best characters that were on the show, Troy McClure and attorney Lionel Hutz, which were probably the most well-known, but he did others as well. In the middle of all this, he was also starring in movies. Well, sometimes starring, a lot of times doing like supporting character work and stuff like that. Generally speaking, he was basically everywhere. Like his voice was so, how would you say it? Like it was so recognizable and noticeable.
You'll know it if you hear it, like it's definitely one of those things that like if you hear his voice, you'll be like, oh, that's Phil Hartman. I
Exactly.
hear him everywhere.
Hear him everywhere, exactly.
Yeah.
If you are familiar with his work, his typical characters come across as kind of larger than life. They're a little bit arrogant, they're a little bit narcissistic. It's the over the topness of how he plays these characters that make them hilarious. By all accounts, from people he worked with on The Simpsons or Lorne Michaels of SNL to the team over at News Radio, Phil was considered incredibly humble and down to earth and very helpful to his colleagues and just generally a pleasant guy to be around. Again, he got his start in life, or not in life, like he got his start in comedy his rise in prominence was so late in life that he wasn't one of those guys who was just like raised a celebrity child and like just thought he was the greatest thing in the
Mm-hmm.
world. He knew what it was like to kind of struggle and come up, and so he was very, very thoughtful about it. He married several times. He was married for 2 years in the 80s. Then he married another woman for 3 years. And then the main antagonist of this story, Phil, married in 1987. This woman is called, her name is Bryn Omdahl. Bryn was an aspiring actress, and it seems like that and a cocktail of alcohol and narcotics were ultimately the cause of her and Phil's downfall. You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned one of your least favorite people. Joe Rogan actually plays a part in this. So, as you mentioned, he was in news radio with Phil, and by all accounts, they were friends with each other. Yeah, they would have been pretty close to the same age, I think, actually around that time. And also because
Mm-hmm.
the Joe Rogan podcast is so prominent and he has so many people that are on the show, there's tons of content that's out there. He's had pretty much anybody who's been on news radio, connected to news radio, connected to Phil Hart. All of these people have done interviews on his show, and Phil Hartman comes up a lot, obviously, because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of these, because everybody who worked with him loved him, and they were all
Yeah.
struck by what happened to him. So, like I mentioned, Joe and Phil were friends throughout their time in news radio. And to your earlier point, Andy Dick is also going to make an appearance here because he was also in news radio, as you mentioned, and he played a
Mm-hmm.
role in this to varying degrees, depending on who you believe, on what ended up happening to
Mm-hmm.
Phil and Bryn. From what Joe himself has said on the podcast, so much of the toxic dynamic of Phil and Bryn's relationship had to do with her career aspirations and where Phil was in life.
Mm-hmm.
They married in
Yeah.
1987. So think about that. They got married a year after Phil gets on SNL. So he was not like the guy yet. Like he's like just his head's poking out of water basically at this point.
Right. But he still has like a really good job.
He has a good, well, so we don't really know that because if you, for context, the entire cast, almost the entire cast of the previous season had been fired. So he started in 86.
Mm.
The cast of 85, which included Robert Downey Jr. and Anthony Michael Hall, all of them got fired because nothing was hitting
Weird. I don't
SNL.
remember them. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, SNL has fits and starts. Like there's moments where it's comedy gold, and there's moments where it just totally sucks. And the year
Mm-hmm.
before Phil started, it was in the totally sucks category. Taylor, this is funny. On the first episode of this season, this was season 12. That's the season he started. The announcer called him Phil Hoffman. Like it's like
Funny.
again, like they're just like amateur hour, right?
They're just like, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, again, like he wasn't who he eventually became, but by the next year, so that would have been 87, 88, his star was on the rise. He was 3 years away from being big enough to where he was on The Simpsons, which again, to younger folks, The Simpsons back then, if not paralleled, almost certainly eclipsed SNL in terms of popularity.
Mm-hmm.
I think so,
Mm-hmm.
right? Would you say that's accurate?
I think so. I think it was more accessible. I mean, like I said before, like I don't remember how the heck you ever watched anything like more than once. There definitely weren't like SNL reruns, I don't think, but there were Simpsons reruns, so it was on more. It had the opportunity to be on more often, right?
Yeah, and also
Makes
this,
sense.
I would, yeah, and also this would have been like the golden era of The Simpsons, like the funniest, the best, like all the most memorable stuff that The Simpsons produced. So getting on there, I would argue, was probably harder than getting on SNL because everybody wanted to be on The Simpsons, and because they have a
Yeah.
very finite number of characters they can have on there. His star was skyrocketing at this point. It was very clear, apparently, to those around Phil and Bryn that their relationship was toxic. At this point, they had two kids together, and those around Phil would notice that Bryn made it a point to embarrass him publicly, like talking down to him,
Ugh.
just basically making everyone around them feel uncomfortable in their presence. This had gotten to such a level. Go ahead, sorry.
You can talk about his intro in SNL with her in it. Do you know that part?
I don't remember that.
So when they do the thing where it's like Phil Hartman, I'm like it's someone like standing in New York City, like smiling, like that, how they still do
Yeah.
that, like someone like whatever. So in his, you'll see that he's at a table with a blonde woman, and that's her, and her earring is swinging like really, really fast because she wouldn't stop staring at the camera, and they had to be like, move your head, this isn't about you. And so she was so mad, and she like swung her face backwards, and her earring is swinging, and he smiles, and that's his intro.
I'm gonna
But
go
you
back
can
and
tell
watch
that
that.
she had just moved her head because people were like, "Stop fucking looking at the camera. No, we're not introducing you. We're introducing him."
Oh, I'm gonna go back and look at that. Yeah, I never saw that. I watched a ton of SNL skits, but I never went back to the intro. How do you remember that, Taylor?
I feel like I read that in an article that was like a I don't know how I know that. I don't
Interesting.
know. It's in there. I don't know
Interesting.
much math. Yeah.
That and the fact that you know that tote is German for murder are like the weirdest random things that are connected to my story that I never would have anticipated anyone knowing that you did. So
I'm full of surprises.
full surprises. Apparently, this toxicity level got to the point where Joe Rogan would frequently tell Phil he should consider the divorce. He said that he talked to him about like 5 or 6 times about this, like, hey, this isn't good. Like, we can tell something's going on. Phil didn't
Hmm.
want to, and what Joe said on the podcast is the reason he didn't want to do this was because he'd already been divorced twice, and
Hmm.
because at this time he had this squeaky clean family man quality to him in Hollywood, he thought that a divorce would
Hmm.
actually tarnish his image and inhibit his career essentially.
Okay, so we can say that Joe Rogan in this story is a good friend of Phil Hartman, but now Joe Rogan is a lunatic because he gets people to take ivermectin.
I don't I don't agree with any of this. Like you sound
What are you even talking about?
I had this whole discussion. Yeah, okay, so the I'm not going to the whole COVID thing. I don't really like care about it. It's like I think that just generally speaking, he has this reputation as this like right wing insane person. It's like no, he was a stand up comic and like a UFC commentator, and then started a podcast and just like talks to people. Like I
That
don't.
is kind of crazy. All right, we can talk about this later. Continue.
We'll have a whole. Why don't we do a
But
Joe Rogan section?
I'm willing to say that Joe Rogan is a good friend of Phil Hartman
Okay. I think
on the
that's been
record.
documented because like everybody who's been on the podcast has also brought this up. Which again, a lot of people have been on the podcast about this. Actually, Andy Dick was on the podcast once, and that was basically enough.
Can we say
Uh,
fuck Andy Dick?
yeah. Well, I don't know even about that because like I think that the guy really has a lot of problems like psychologically and
That's true. He has a
substance
lot of like
abuse wise.
psychological.
Yeah, it's
Right.
like I don't
That's
want to
fair.
like shame him for that, but like I said before, Brent also had substance abuse issues and had tried unsuccessfully to get clean. She would bounce from one substance to the next, and at a new so this is where he comes in. At a news radio Christmas party in 1997, Andy Dick would give Bryn cocaine and cause her
Hmm.
to relapse and go back down the hard drug path. So I don't know how you
That's what
categorize
I
this.
heard. That's the thing that I heard. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how you categorize this, but like to me, there's like three categories of substance users, right? There's the drinkers, there's the chill drug users, which is like marijuana, mushrooms, like organic drug users. Then there's the powders, right? There's the people who get into the powders, and then like I feel like that is a divergent path that escalates any psychological issues that might be pre-existing. Do you sense that
Sure.
too, or
Yeah, I think well, I mean, obviously there's other like has like heroin and meth and like worse things you could be on, I think.
yeah,
But
that's true.
but but yeah, definitely.
So that's what partially why I think people also put this because like sure it was cocaine, it was one time, but you're dealing with someone that has like a history of substance abuse and clearly isn't doing
Right. It's
well
not
mentally.
she's not the right person to give that to.
Right. Right.
And he knew it, right? Like he did not know. But he also has his own problems, so
Yeah,
fine.
exactly. Apparently, this caused quite a rift with the castmates because everyone loved Phil and everyone could see that Bryn
Hmm.
was unstable and they were pissed that Andy did this. Like they saw like the why would you give this person that we know that has this issue? But like, again, to your point, he has his own issues. But there's also this
Hmm.
presumption that maybe he didn't know that she had a history of substance abuse and that's he was just like trying to be a good time guy, you know?
Yeah.
The fighting in the house got to such an extent that Phil would have his kids go stay elsewhere on occasions. I don't know if you've ever been in a relationship like this. I mean, I certainly have. But when you're with someone
I'm not
where,
a yeller.
yeah, like when you know exactly what their triggers are, how to read their mood, and you just brace yourself for battle. That's kind of like what
Hmm.
this sounded like to me. In my mind, I can see Bryn in a robe, like sulking around the house with an empty bottle of vodka at noon, and Phil being like, "Kids, you got to go to your aunt's house tonight." Like knowing that the
Ugh,
next
poor
12 hours
babies.
are going to be absolute hell. Phil
Mm-hmm.
did try to help her for what it's worth. It's actually completely in line with what everybody says about his character. He got her into rehab a few times.
Yeah.
It ultimately failed, like I said before. And as it became more clear to him that she resented his career, he would try to pull strings in Hollywood to get her roles. She
Mm-hmm.
did have a few roles here or there, but this is Phil Hartman. People, like, again,
Yeah.
you might not remember how huge this guy was back in the day. She would have had to be Nicole Kidman in this era to not be
You
in his
can't like
shadow.
catch up. Yeah.
So all this culminates on May 28th of 1998. Bryn went out to dinner with a friend and had some drinks. She gets home. Her and Phil have a fight, which seems to be the typical standard of their relationship. We don't know what it was
Mm-hmm.
over, but regardless, he goes to bed and she stays up. She apparently still has like is doing drugs or drinking or some combination thereof. Around 3 a.m.,
Mm-hmm.
she goes into their bedroom where he is asleep and shoots him 3 times. Once
Ugh,
in the head, once in the neck, and once in the chest, which is like a weird, like, just what were you thinking about? Just
Jesus.
going up and down like you're
It
doing
just sounds
connect the dots with his like spine.
like crazy, just like I don't know, who knows? Yeah. Ugh. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's so sad.
Yeah. And
Were the
look,
kids home?
they were, I'll get into that.
Oh no.
Going back to the
No.
Andy Dick thing, later on they found out that she had a cocktail of Zoloft, cocaine, alcohol in her system. So the cocaine thing stuck after that Christmas party, apparently. Bryn leaves the house then and goes over to a former boyfriend's house, a guy named Ron Douglas, and tells him what she did. They go back to the Hartman house together, and Ron discovers that she's telling the truth and immediately calls the police.
Good job, Ron.
At this point, yeah, the police show up and the police take the kids out of the house.
Oh, she left them there?
Well, Ron was in the house too. Ron was with Bryn in the house.
But she left them there when she went to go get Ron.
Yeah, she did.
Yo,
So the police show up,
continue.
take Ron out of the house, take the kids out of the house. Bryn locked herself in the bathroom, and then shoots
Mhm.
herself in the head and kills herself.
Ugh. No.
The Andy Dick thing again, like you're familiar with John Lovitz, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so John Lovitz was also part of this whole. I mean, all these guys, it's like L.A. comedy, right? It's the L.A. comedy scene. They all know each other,
Yeah.
so they were all part of the Comedy Store scene, the Improv. They were on. Actually, I don't remember if Andy Dick was on SNL, but John Lovitz definitely was on SNL. And I think John Lovitz, after
Mm-hmm.
Phil Hartman died, went on news radio as well. Do you recall that at all? With that season that
I
you
don't
watched half
remember.
of? Okay.
I don't remember. I just remember. So they have him die of like natural causes, but he was like the main character. He was just such a great character on that show. Very Phil Hartman, like a very like a conceited, like funny guy.
Yeah.
So without him, it just, I mean, the whole was just ginormous. Like they never, ever, ever would have written him out of that show, you know? So it was like a plot line that they never would have had.
It's almost like the show
So
wouldn't have been. It wouldn't doesn't need to exist without that character in it.
exactly. And they all knew it, and they were all just so fucking sad. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I meant, like with the whole John Lovitz thing. So apparently he's one of the guys who really was pissed off about this. He was apparently really close to Phil, and they would get into physical fights when they would see each other. And like they're in the comedy scene in LA together. They would see each other all the time. They'd be at the comedy store. There's stories about John Lovitz just bashing his head against a bar at the comedy store when they ran into each other. Like it was to
Andy
that
Dick?
extent. Yeah.
Oh,
Because that's how
I mean,
responsible that crew of people saw. And like in one of the episodes, Rob Lowe was on the Rogan podcast and he was like, yeah, I had Andy on once, definitely don't need to talk to him ever again, like we're good. Like it's like this
mhm.
caused like this like legit rift amongst that entire castmate or the crew. Like I mentioned, so Phil would have died in at the age of 49. That was in 1998. He started his rise in fame in 86, so that's 12 years, and probably like really it's 10
Yeah.
years where he's kind of living out his dream, which is kind of the fact that I find really sad. He did
Yeah.
he did the thing that they say can't be done or is hard to be done, which is finding your calling in life really late in life.
Hmm.
By this math, he would have been 37 when he got his big break that first year of SNL, which that's awesome, right?
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so awesome. As someone who has no big breaks and is 40, that's awesome.
This is our big break, Taylor. This is it. Guys, please tell your friends. Please tell your friends. Taylor needs this. She's literally crying. Um, yeah, going back to the two kids, so they ended up being taken in by Bryn's sister and her husband. Apparently Bergen, the daughter, she ended up having her own substance abuse issues, but I checked out her Insta page, which is fairly active. If you want to see, it's Bergen Hartman. She is now 11 years and 4 weeks clean from opioids and apparently happily married.
Awesome.
So good for her. Not much to
Good,
say.
good, good, good.
Yeah, there's not much to say about Sean, the son, other than he lives in California. He's a musician and artist.